Shabbat Shalom PJC. I hope everyone is doing well and healthy. This Shabbos Parshas Vayakhel Pekudei is the actualization, is the actual construction of the Mishkan, the description of all the details, all of the utensils and the tools that go into creating a mikdash. There is one tool. There is one element in the construction of this first sanctuary towards God that is so critical that the Torah spends some time, Moshe spends some time introducing this element to the Jewish people. What element am I talking about? I'm talking about the architect, the craftsman who led the entire project, Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur from the tribe of Judah. Bezalel was a young man endowed, the Torah tells us, with wisdom and insight, with skill, not only with one particular object. He wasn't a crafted goldsmith. He was a crafted goldsmith and silversmith. This was a young man who knew how to manipulate and utilize whatever material was brought in front of him to create a mikdash, to create a physical home for the Almighty. Something that seems to be contradictory to what we know about divinity, to what we think we understand about God. To imagine and to explore that He should manifest Himself in our midst through the creation of a building is wild. Yet we look to Bezalel, the craftsman, the engineer, the architect, the artist behind the creation of this mikdash. Moshe isn't expected to be the creator of the mikdash. It's Bezalel. Why is Bezalel chosen? So the Torah tells us a number of details about his wisdom, that God endowed him with great insight, with great artistry. And yet I think there is one detail that drives home his eligibility, that drives home the point that he is uniquely qualified to be the architect for creating a mikdash. Who is Bezalel? The Torah tells us that he's Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur. He's Bezalel, the child of Uri, the grandson of Hur. Hur is a name that's familiar to us. Who is Hur? When the Jewish people, the Midrash tells us, our sages tell us, when the Jewish people were concerned that Moshe wasn't returning in last week's Parsha, they turned to their two leaders. They said to Aaron and they said to Hur, make for us a new leader, make for us a new God who can lead us through the desert. For Moshe has gone. And the Torah records Aaron's reaction. Aaron's reaction is, bring me your gold, bring me your jewelry. Tomorrow we'll make a chag. He delays it. He pushes it off. The Torah doesn't tell us what happens to Hur because it is tragic and it is frankly horrifying. What happens to Hur? The sages come along later and tell us that Hur objected. Hur protested. He turned around to these Jews and said, what are you doing? We're standing at the foot of Har Sinai, of Mount Sinai. We just heard from God Himself. What are you doing? Just a little bit of patience. And the Midrash concludes by telling us such a tragic scene unfolds, where the Jews are so focused, they're so demanding that they should have a new leader. They can't hear any rational response from Hur. They can't handle any patience. And they turn around to Hur, and the sages tell us they murder him. They kill him in cold blood. And so it remains startling that just a week later, Moshe turns around and says, you know who's going to build the mikdash? You know who's going to dream it up? Who's going to be the architect? Who has the wisdom and the insight? Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur. You have to imagine the constructing of the Mishkan happened in the shadow of the Egel Hazav, happened in the shadow of the drastic and devastating actions of the Jewish people at the foot of Mount Sinai. And so you can imagine the intensity, the message Moshe is giving the Jewish people by selecting Bezalel. The message God is giving the Jewish people by instilling wisdom and insight and skill into Bezalel. He was a young man, a teenager, without the life experience of building, of being a professional, of achieving, of taking on a project, except for the fact that he had more life experience than anyone else there, because he had to come to terms with destruction and healing. The young man Bezalel watched his brothers and sisters, he watched the Jewish people murder his grandfather. What was his healing process? Was to look at the world, look at the beautiful world around him, and say, how do I harness the tools, the materials of this world to create a beautiful space for God to manifest himself? Moshe didn't have this experience. No one else had experienced the level of tragedy, the level of personal distraughtness like Bezalel. And though it was so deeply tragic for this young man to go through what he went through, it positioned him uniquely to teach the Jewish people, what does it mean to heal from tragedy? What does it mean to come back from that abyss of grief, of depression? The young grandson watched the Jewish people murder his grandfather. And he didn't turn around and define his life by resentment or by anger. But he turned around and said, how can I bring more healing? How can I bring God back into my life, back into this world? We are living through a time of global grief. Though we really may not feel it on a day-to-day basis, as we adjust, as we begin to see the sun on the horizon, we begin to see the future. We need to focus on the idea of building. We need to focus on the idea of creating a sanctuary in which God can manifest himself. A beacon, if you will, for all those who need to be inspired. For all those who need to find more meaning in our world following the challenging and difficult months that we've had, the challenging and difficult year that we've had. Bezalel, the young man, immature in years, but sophisticated and wise in insight and experience, teaches the Jewish people to be patient, teaches the Jewish people to heal, teaches the Jewish people to look forward. Please God, we too will heal, will be patient, continue to be patient, as the end of this pandemic takes much longer than any of us want or hope or expected. And we will be inspired by the artistry, the insight and the wisdom of the young man Bezalel, to continue to build our shul, to build our sanctuary, to be a makom kadosh, to be a place where God manifests his presence for us and for all those in our world, all those in our community who are in need of healing. Shabbat Shalom.